We're continuing to read the biography of Thoreau. Page, we don't know where it's going. 374. We're talking now at that May. We're in the springtime now. Something started to go terribly wrong. Thoreau's journal entries thinned and frayed. Ooh, the spark dimmed. The sparkle dimmed. Uh-oh. We're going into a dark period. By June 17th, Emerson was deeply worried. Quote, Henry Thoreau is feeble and languishes this season to our alarm. He wrote his brother William, quote, we have tried to persuade him to come and spend a week with us for a change. 2 days later, in a letter to Blake, Thoreau finally admitted the truth, quote, I have been sick and good for nothing but to lie on my back and wait for something to turn up for 2 or 3 months. He wrote to cancel their plans for a summer excursion. Nearly 4 months later, he interrupted his journal to confess to 4 or 5 months of invalidity and worthlessness. The weakness had started in his knees and spread from there, leaving him at his worst, barely able to walk. Oh. Now we're into the illness and recovery. This actually is illness and recovery. The cause was uncertain. Dr. Bartlett was at a loss. Was it psychosomatic depression following the completion of Walden? Brought on when Thoreau realized he could never again come up to his lifetime's achievement? Question. The notion is plausible, given the unyielding press of ambition that had driven him so hard all through 1854. Yet what of the sheer exuberance through the winter? The joy radiating from the journal, the tireless energy of long day skating in the bitter sub-zero cold, tracking in the deep snow, sailing in the raw and blustery spring. More likely, Thoreau was leveled by a flare-up of his chronic tuberculosis, caused when a lesion in his lungs ruptured and sent the virulent bacilli coursing through his body to lodge in his knees and hips, inflaming the bone and degrading the muscle. By April. Don't read it? Don't read it?
Don't read all those. Go to section, that's good.
I'll read it silently until I get something better. The beach had been on Thoreau's mind since April. For 3 years, his manuscript about Cape Cod had been gathering dust on George Curto's desk at Putnam's, stalled since Thoreau had withdrawn a Yankee in Canada. midway through publication after Curtis censored his remarks on religion. Greeley had begged Thoreau not to break with the valuable and well-placed Curtis. Now his advice was paying off on the heels of Thoreau's Walden success. Curtis dug out an old manuscript, dusted off, and decided to run it as Putnam's summer travel series. By April, Thoreau was correcting the proofs for the first monthly installment, and on July 4th, even as he and Channing were boarding the holiday train to Boston, bound for Cape Cod, this July issue was hitting the booksellers with the second installment. Thoreau and Channing, whose Knights of the Umbrella and Bundle might have looked like tramps before, but now they would return as celebrities. After rushing to meet the steamer, they arrived at the wharf, only to be told the captain had decided to lay over for the holiday. They spent the day visiting the galleries of Boston Athenaeum, where Thoreau studied Frederick Church's sublime wind-washed canvas, the Andes of Ecuador, then watching a regatta. They overnighted with the obliging Alcotts, who were packing to move to a rent-free house in Walpole, New Hampshire. Next morning they sailed to Provincetown. The following morning they took the first stage to North Truro, arriving at 6 a.m. and walking a mile through the fog to the Highland White House. Since Thoreau's last day there in June 1850, the lighthousekeeper James Small had added a boarding house for $3.50 a week. When they settled in for the next 2 weeks, it's still not too late to join us, Thoreau urged Blake. The table was not so clean as could be desired, but it was better than Provincetown, and Small was intelligent. Good man to deal with. Come by all means, he pleaded. His Worcester friend still couldn't come, but Thoreau employed enjoyed himself anyway, relishing the sea fog and embracing nor'easter. Bathing in the ocean, botanizing here and there, talking with the locals, filling pages of his neglected journal with notes. He and Channing left early on July 18, sailing back with so little wind that they did not reach Boston Harbor until candlelight. Methinks I'm beginning to be better, Thoreau reassured Blake. Then came bad news. Just as Putnam's was running the third installment of Cape Cod, quote, The Beach, in August, even as Thoreau was thanking him for payment and sending revisions for the September installment, Curtis canceled the rest of the series. Why? Thoreau surmised they heard he planned to expand the series into a book, which was, he wrote back to Curtis, news to him. But Curtis equivocated. The real problem wasn't Thoreau's future publication plans, it was his tone. Curtis had already cut the more indelicate passages with bowdlerization. Thoreau astonishingly accepted in silence. But when Curtis got down to reading the next installment, The Wellfleet Oysterman, that's famous, he must have choked in dismay. Irreverent and profane, this was a chapter that had made the Concord audience, quote, laugh till they cried. Worse still, even the cleaned-up versions of the previous chapters had already offended the Cape's residents, who were complaining in the papers. Better reason, Curtis, to feed the prickly Thoreau with a fake excuse than be honest and ignite his wrath. As Curtis wrote his publisher, just send it all back to Thoreau. Quote, he has an overweening conceit, and it will deplete him grandly, unquote. It did. Thoreau, sick and defeated, glumly asked Curtis to return the remainder. Once again he had been burned by America's timid and censorious press. Quote, "It costs so much to publish," he sighed in his journal. Quote, "Would it not be better for the author to put his manuscripts in a safe?" Do you think we should just put our manuscripts in a safe?
Why not burn it?
You want to burn them or save them?
They're not published.
I only publish posthumously. Posthumous. I would publish. Why not publish posthumously? Posthumous. I don't know. Nowadays, it's cheaper to publish. Walden was supposed to have been his breakout book, buoying the rest of his work. It was a breakout book, though, wasn't it? That April, with Putnam's reviving the dormant Cape Cod and encouraged Thoreau, had prodded his publishers. Wasn't it time, with Walden leading the way, and Cape Cod and Press to reissue a week? After all, he still had those 700 plus copies boxed in the attic. God, he should sell those books. He has 700 copies, but there they would stay. He just needs marketing, I guess. Late in September, Ticknor and Fields reported back that Walden was selling, but not selling well. They still had 256 copies of the initial print run of 2000. After a promising start, sales had plummeted. They were very sorry, quote, "for your sake as well as ours." Sales would stay slow.
2,000 copies.
Why did he print them all? They didn't have print on demand. Why didn't he use print on demand? God. By February 1857, only 16 copies were left. By December 1858, they calculated even the teeny handful of copies remaining were enough for the foreseeable future. Maybe I should stop there. That's a stopping point. Just began. I just did 13 minutes.
He got sick. How did he get sick?
I read it, but you didn't want to hear about it.
No, the symptoms.
How do you get sick?
He got a cold.
How do you get sick?
He got a cold.
You get sick by a lesion in your lungs.
So it was a cold.
If germs can get in, if bacteria can get into you, don't get a cut. Anyways, he got sick, but you didn't want to hear about it. We didn't read about his sickness. We were reading about illness and recovery, which we started reading, but then read silently. It said a lesion in his lungs, dear.
Then you say don't cut yourself.
It starts out saying it's mysterious and we don't know the reason. So we don't know the reason. And we didn't read the reason. Because we skipped in the middle of this section about his illness. Because we only can understand positive things and couldn't process it. But we did read about about the selling of Walden. And we went back to Cape Cod. Wasn't such a good reading. You got sick of Thoreau.
Cape Cod was good.
All right.